good morning. Hello. It's Fiona Brown here, CEO of SOCAP, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all today to Australia's webinar on customer experience with both Mike Wittenstein and Steve Simpson. Thank you for joining us today, and this is the first of our free member-only webinar series, and I'm thanking you all for coming on board with us today. I'm joined here with Kathleen Allen, who joins us today. She's in the SOCAP office and she's working in the background to make sure that we can all connect smoothly and easily. Now, before we all get started, let me go through some housekeeping tips. Now, don't worry, for all our participants today, you will be muted, so we won't be able to hear any conversations at your computer, but for Mike and Steve, of course, you are the exception, so please make sure your mobiles are off. So for our participants today, if you're having any trouble hearing the audio via your computer, please use your phone and dial your state's appropriate numbers as listed in the confirmation email sent through to you, and enter your participant passcode. That's 22079303, followed by the hash key. We've also placed that number for your reference in the chat box on the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded, and that means that we'll send you a link after the event in a few days when we get it back from our supplier, and you can view that on our YouTube channel. We hope that this is both an informative and an interactive session for us all today, so we'll be having lots of opportunities for Q&A with Mike and Steve. Now, they've said that they're happy to address your questions throughout today's presentation, and particularly in the last 15 minutes. So in order to ask questions, have a look at your screen on the bottom left-hand side. There's a message box, and above that you can also see who's participating in our meeting today. You can type your questions at the very bottom and it will be seen to all. Alternatively, you can select my name, and again, it's Fiona Brown, and you can send me a question privately. Now, also through the course of the webinar today, you will see some slides which are mostly white, and on those slides there'll be a question posed to you, and both Mike and Steve are going to encourage you to answer your questions on these thought-provoking questions and answer those via the question box on the screen. So please, I hope you're able to do that and get involved. We'll also be sending you an evaluation email after today's webinar, and I encourage your feedback as I do with all things that we offer you. So please send me back your feedback, and I'd like to hear your comments around this webinar and the webinar series in general. Now, let me introduce you to Mike Wittenstein and Steve Simpson. Mike Wittenstein is the founder of StoryMiners, the delivery arm for great customer experience design. He's the architect for design that bridges the gap between analysis, metrics and data, and a brand-defining experience for your customer. Mike's passion is for moving businesses from the middle of the pack to the top, and he's supported by a lifetime of experience. His experience spans 2 decades, more than 25 countries and over 300 companies. He's worked with companies such as IBM, founding his own company and consulting with organisations of all sizes around the world. And he's nearly perfected the art of great customer experience design. Steve Simpson is an international speaker, author and consultant on organisational culture and customer service. UK-based e-customer service world have described Steve as Australia's leading corporate culture authority. SOCAP in Europe have described Steve as the leading Australian customer care guru. Steve is featured at 2 world conferences on customer service management in the US, where he rated in the top 10 speakers, and was the only Australian to feature at the SOCAP International Annual Conference in New Orleans, the HDI Conference in Las Vegas, and the recent European Conference on Customer Management in London. So that's more than enough from me. Welcome to Steve and Mike. Let's hear about why customer experience matters. Over to you, gentlemen.
Thanks very much, Fiona, and it's Steve Simpson here. I'd just like to say that Mike and I know I speak on behalf of Mike, are delighted to be here today and to connect with you guys. And if you've chosen to join this webinar or seen the video recording of this webinar, you've chosen wisely, because Mike is a wealth of knowledge, and I'm just truly impressed with what he can bring to the whole notion of customer experience. So much so that we've become friends. And just so you're aware of the personal side to Mike, he was born in Orlando, now lives in Atlanta in Georgia. He says he's a designer who can't draw and a weekend woodworker. He has spoken he's been in the business for 25 years, 25 countries, speaks 4 languages. Those credentials down the bottom of the slide right now, Mike explained those to me last week, but I've forgotten. My apologies, Mike, but terrific credentials. There's some of the clients that Mike has worked with. So I make the point again, if you've chosen to come along to this webinar or to watch the video, you've chosen wisely. Mike's got a heap to share.
Wonderful. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about Steve as well. Steve was born in Melbourne, and he's had a couple of very formative experiences in his life. One in particular that caught my attention was that he started off as a teacher, and then he stopped that profession and moved into something else. And Steve, we haven't talked about this yet, but I think that was one of the first times in your life when you really started to get a feeling for how important culture was, because it was in part because of the culture that you didn't want to continue at that profession at the time. We've been in business about the same amount of time. Steve has been all over the place, and he's a certified speaking professional with the Australian National Speakers Association, and that is a very difficult designation to come by, and I'm honored to be speaking with Steve today. He's worked and helped shape experiences and cultures at a number of brands that you enjoy working with. And let's just get started. Our plan today is to cover these topics. We're making this a very, very practical presentation for you. We hope that you'll use our presentation as a backdrop for your own thinking. And as we're going through explaining new concepts and giving you new ideas, we hope that you'll take some notes and begin to apply those at your own place of work. Feel free to ask questions as you go along, and we'll be happy to respond to those in the question area. I'll be watching when Steve's speaking, and he'll be watching when I'm going. So here are some goals, and let's get started with a definition of customer experience. Customer experience isn't something provided by a single silo, by a definition, by a brand. It's something your customers perceive. It's everything your brand does for your customers, less everything your business processes do to them and how it makes them feel. So when customers are interacting with brands, it's everything that happens to them and for them that gives them that sense of what an experience is. And notice I use the word feel in the definition. The emotional component of an experience is all important, as we'll hear about very shortly. So please type in your answers. Is the definition of customer experience different for SOCAP? Steve, any thoughts on guiding that question for everyone?
I think it's a really good question, Mike. And you know, in the whole area of customer affairs, customer complaint management, it's a really good question. And I'm not seeing any typing at the moment, but so maybe people are pondering this deeply.
Oh. You know, in my opinion, Steve, how customer affairs handles things is part of the customer experience. Often, the customer service department is where problem customers are sent because the business doesn't know how to deal with them otherwise. And how they're handled can make or break a relationship, make or break a big sale, and definitely has a big impact on word of mouth.
And I can see that Kim and Victor are with you. They're saying that there is no difference. The same for SOCAP. Victor's saying I don't think it's any different. So that's good feedback to get.
So today I'd like to share a little bit with you on a new angle on all of this. What is an intelligent experience? It's really just a set of different principles. It's not anything strikingly new, but if you'll look at your experiences and have conversations with your management teams and your followers around this topic, it might just get some lights to go on. So what is an intelligent experience? It's one that offers a better experience at lower cost and with less effort. It's designed better. It's more intelligent. It senses. It learns. It interacts the way you'd expect it to. Here's an example, a very small one, of an intelligent experience. This you'll probably notice is one of Apple's flagship stores. It's located on the island of Manhattan in New York City. And having worked in the real estate business a long time ago, one of my friends told me that Apple negotiated a very sweet deal for this piece of property. It was a very intelligent deal. No one had created an all-glass structure just to house a sign before. And what Apple did is they paid the lowest rent possible deep down in the basement for their retail store. And they paid the even cheaper rent for air rights, which is what they're using here to put up this edifice. It was negotiated on the air rights, which are much less expensive. You know, it's the value of the property above the ground floor. So they got away in a very, very smart way. That's just the real side of their intelligence. The results of the Apple success story are tremendous. They've opened almost 500 locations at latest count, huge sales per square foot. They dwarf their nearest competitor by 4 or 5 times, and they're a full 20 to 50 times more profitable and have higher sales per square foot than most other stores in my country. One of the things that Apple does to make their experiences more intelligent, and I'm sure you've seen this in Sydney and other cities where they have Apple stores in Australia, is the check-in process. Rather than waiting until you check out to provide you the best customer service, they do it the moment that you check in. They get your name, they understand your intent, they route you to the right person, they add your name to the queue, they give you something to do so that your perceived wait time is lower, and they give you realistic expectations of what's going to happen next. So all of those things go to make you feel better because the staff is doing things for you. Apple also innovated around the Genius Bar. They created an entire new service. And to me, this is the epitome of an intelligent experience because in retail, often the lowest paid, least prepared people who cost the least are put in the front to deal with the customers. Apple took its most trained, most qualified, and highest paid people and put them right in the front lines, and instead of sticking them where no one can see them, they placed them right in public view and made that part of the experience. And we all know that that's been one of the highlights of the Apple Store for the last number of years. So I have a question. As we think about the role of the consumer affairs professional, you know, my connotation of that industry is that these folks usually work one step removed. There's a telephone, a teleconference, there's something in the way of actually being in touch with a customer affairs professional. Now, you could extend the definition and say they do work right in front of the customer, but I think that would be more of a sales rep. Please correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding there. But what do you think a customer care and customer affairs professional can do in the store or outside of the store? Just think about that for a minute. Technology is changing. The way we conceive and deliver experiences is changing too. What is it that we can do a little bit differently? One more place that customer care is popping up is right in the interface of software design. What you're looking at is a screen grab of a Kindle, and the lady on the right-hand side named Amy has been in a number of commercials for their Mayday application. Using Mayday, you can have a one-way video chat and audio chat with a representative from Amazon. You can see her. She cannot see you, but she can see what's on your screen, and she can do the play-by-play soccer or football tracing. So she can guide your cursor and help you to success very, very quickly. I believe that we're going to start seeing more and more video help applications like that. The other most recent one I've seen is at Hertz Rent-A-Car in New York City, where instead of having to wait in a long queue, there are a number of kiosks, and you can actually talk to a person live, and it's very similar to this setup right here. So what kind of role can customer care play on screen? That's a game changer. It means that there'll be an opportunity for customer care folks to play a strategic role, a brand steward role, a sales saving role, and market research role, in addition to more, I'm sure. But I'm very excited about how the world is changing, and I think the definition of customer care professional is about to take a giant leap forward. Another example I'd love to share with you is a new store that was co-created by eBay Innovation Labs and a women's fashion retailer called Rebecca Minkoff. They created a new store, a flagship store in the New York City area, And you can see the video on YouTube by just typing in Rebecca Minkoff, and it'll pop a video up right away for you. It's quite compelling. It's one of the best examples that I've seen of an electronically assisted shopping experience. It's truly an intelligent experience. A woman walks up to a large display. She's standing here right now. She's greeted with some runway walks, some signs, a little bit of advertising, some directions. She jumps into the application. She starts looking for merchandise. You'll notice she's looking at a jacket here. She can pick the size, and her finger is just about to touch a button that says, "Please put that garment in a fitting room for me, and page me when that garment and the fitting room are ready. Add that item to my room," is what it says. She's able to see corollary products, put things aside, bring other things closer, ask for some help, all different kinds of things. As soon as she walks into the room, she can set the lighting, call a stylist, but all the details have been really thought out. It's truly intelligent. She can even set the lighting for different times of day so that she can get a really good look at how those clothes might fit her. You'll notice in the reflection of the mirror, there's a rack, and on it there are some clothes hanging. Another aspect of the intelligent experience is that each item that comes into the dressing room has an RFID tag on it. And the computer in the mirror knows what's in the room and what's not, knows what the customer's previous purchases are, if the computer's been given access to that information. She also knows what the customer's intent is and can start to infer that ever better. The more garments that are brought in, the more the stylist is called. So the experience itself shapes itself as the shopper spends a little bit more time in the dressing room. What's interesting to me is that shopping has moved from out in the store to the point of decision, which is right inside the dressing room. So do you think that customer care professionals might have a role about what happens in the mirror? And don't take me too literally on that. It could be maybe customer care is called because the people that work in the store are having trouble with the inventory system, and they need help right away. For example, a sweater might come in with an RFID tag, and it's showing a pair of pants. Well, that's an issue that you can't just escalate slowly. You need to solve that right away because you've got somebody waiting in the dressing room, and who knows how many other customers' garments or experiences are going to be affected by that. So I think, again, customer care and thinking through things from the customer's perspective, really, really important of delivering a more intelligent experience. So here are some principles that you can use to think through, is this experience intelligent? And I encourage you to give these things a try, maybe later today or tomorrow.
Mike, I just noticed that Victor has made a comment here that you might want to just quickly reflect on. It seems that the role use of customer care professionals is probably now limited by imagination, which is a really good insight.
Yeah, I see that. Victor, that makes me think of a couple of things. Yes, we do need to get these experiences right, but a big part of the experience is the support that's provided to the employees and the customers. So in my experience, the companies that have looked at doing more forward-looking and exciting things like Rebecca Minkoff, they tend to ratchet themselves back. They pull back on their desires because they're afraid they can't support it. In my opinion, if the customer care and customer support disciplines in industry would embrace these newer technologies, they could pave the way for faster adoption, better trials, and better experiences for customers, more satisfying experiences for employees, and of course better experiences for the business itself. So that's really great insight, but I think that CCPs can be an accelerant, and they don't have to wait for somebody else to do things. Steve?
Good point, Mike.
Great. All right, so the first thing to make your experiences more intelligent is to talk to people, listen to their frustration points, find out where their problems are. If you just ask them or listen in, they'll be happy to do that. Another technique that I believe is still undervalued these days that provides us with so much information at Story Miners here in the U.S. and abroad is simply observing what's going on. Even if you can't hear a conversation that a shopper and a clerk are having, or two shoppers are having, or even people calling from home to get some kind of other support by phone or over the web, by watching what they're doing, you can understand more of the situation, you can glean their intent, And by watching their facial expressions, you can learn things that just never show up on surveys. So watching is number 2. Measuring, of course, that's part and parcel of this industry, as well as the customer experience and the service design worlds. We shouldn't stop measuring, but in my opinion, measures will get you a very good picture of what's happened, and observation and talking will point to opportunities that you can do for the future. So I'm a big fan of putting those two together. A couple of other tools and insights that you can use for building more intelligent experiences or to map the journeys. I'd love for those of you that are logged in to just type in yes if you've used these tools and are familiar with them, or no if you've never seen them before. Great. So a customer journey map basically tells you where a customer has been and when they've been. So you can see here it's by channel, store, website, media, and across the top are some other opportunities. By placing the activities that customers have, the problems that they have, the technology that they use, the messages that they bump into at a place in time, it becomes easier for everyone to kind of understand what the business is doing to the customers, so they can right the ship and make sure the business and the brand do more for the customers. Another picture of almost the same information is a simple storyboard. You can see this one starts at top left, and to fit it on one page, it continues on the bottom row. But this is a picture journey of what the customer at a car leasing company goes through. When you use an artist to draw pictures, the scenarios and the conversations are just welded or recorded into people's minds, and they truly have a same-page feeling about that customer experience. This is great for documenting current customer experience as well as future experience. At Story Miners, we detail things even more. We break experiences that might be one big long picture that represents 5 years into smaller steps that might represent a few minutes or an hour or two. And then we go down to one level deeper and we detail out the props that the business has to provide, the software, the kind of people, the conversations, even some of the rules and processes. So by giving people in your organization a really clear picture of what that experience is supposed to be, it's much easier for them to comply. Better yet, it's easier for them to innovate and be part of a really cool solution. If you're interested in experience and service design, you can check out some of the mind-bending and easy-to-use tools at servicedesignTools.org. These are all free to download, and they do get into quite a bit of detail, but just browsing a few of those, you don't have to know all of them, can be really helpful for you as you try some of these new journey mapping techniques. I'd like to share one more example of an intelligent experience before it's almost time to turn it over to Steve. You'll notice on the bottom left, it says Estimote. Estimote is the name of a company that makes beacons. They produce the hardware, which includes a small computer and some communications ability, so that your cell phone, your tablet, your other electronic devices can communicate with it, and when your devices come into the proximity of this beacon, some really cool things can happen if they've been programmed ahead of time. So here's an example. It works really nice as a video. You can look it up at Estimote on YouTube. But on the right-hand side above the Story Miners logo is a table, and on top of that is a black line. That's a cell phone. That desk is a nightstand in a hotel room, and there's a man sleeping to the right of it. You can see the floor plan shows that the beacon, because of the phone's GPS capabilities, knows where the man is in the floor plan. He knows the man is, at least the phone, is in the bedroom. The beacon can also tell what time it is. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. Because the beacon has access to the cell phone, it can also tell that this person has an appointment at 9 o'clock. And because it knows the GPS location and can check traffic conditions, it knows how long it'll take this person to get to where he needs to be, so he can the beacon can signal the phone to set the alarm to chime the alarm 15 minutes earlier to give our traveler a chance to get to his meeting. It's a convoluted example. It's much easier to show in video, but it's a great example of how experiences can be more intelligent. The more we know and the sooner we know, the better we can serve and the lower the cost. The next thing you do in journey mapping is to prototype. We use cardboard boxes to represent elements of store furniture. We use still images and hand-sketch things on iPad to represent new computer interfaces. We don't wait for the interface to be built. We do it on paper. We do it with Legos. We do it with chalk or crayons, anything to get the flow and the feeling across. And we actually prototype software as well, working with our partners. So you've seen how we go from Post-it notes to sketches to videos and all kinds of fun things like that. So you really don't have to guess about customer experience. These intelligent experience ideas are best done by listening for problems, listening to other people's ideas, just like you're doing right now, thinking a little bit about how things could be better. It's nice if you break your teams into two parts, those that have no limits to their thinking and can jump ahead as far as they like with no rules around reality, and then others that understand the limits of today's organization, things like budgets, time, resources, others' expectations, and things like that. Let the two paths extend on their own and then bring them back together. You'll be very surprised at how some very cool ideas can make your current state a lot easier. A plan is always very helpful, but instead of spending more time on this, I think it's time to pass it over to Steve. So Steve, take it away.
Thank you very much, Mike, and thanks for your wonderful insights. I truly get excited by hearing what Mike has to share about this whole customer experience movement, because I've shared this with Mike. I think it's the case that I think in Australia it's underdeveloped compared to where it's at, say, in the US, which I think it makes it very exciting for Australian organisations. But I think that there is a potential flaw in the whole customer experience movement, and it relates to the whole notion of culture, because there's a risk, as I see it, in that the notion of customer experience is seen as an innovation or a technology solution while not attending to the people side of things or the culture side of things. So I think that that's potentially flawed thinking and can lead to a massive lack of benefits emerging from a move towards customer experience. So my stint here is a short one, but just to share some insights into how you can think about the culture side of things to link with a move towards becoming more customer experienced. So I've got a vitally important question, which I think is seldom if ever asked, and it's this one. For us to deliver the customer experience we'd like to deliver, what does our culture need to look and feel like? I doubt that question is asked too often. I think it is an absolutely imperative question. So I'd encourage you to ponder that question and to write down some one or two word answers and share them with us if you would. The question again is, for us to deliver the customer experience we'd like to deliver, what does our culture need to look and feel like? There's some things that hit me between the eyes as Mike talks about aspects of a culture of creativity and accepting new ideas, and maybe there's some thoughts that are coming to your mind, but I'd really appreciate it if you could just type some answers as we go. So I think there's a paradox when it comes to culture, in that I think that often culture is talked about, but I think sometimes culture isn't well understood in practical terms. It's for that reason that I've created the concept of UGRs as a tool to help people understand culture in simple and practical terms. UGRs, or unwritten ground rules, are people's perceptions of this is the way we do things around here. People's perceptions of this is the way we do things around here. I put to you that it is the UGRs, or unwritten ground rules, that constitute your culture. I put to you that culture is not complex. It is simply people's perceptions of this is the way we do things around here. Now, I can see some of you are typing in now, which I really appreciate. So we've got, in response to the question, what does their culture need to look and feel like? We've got from Kim, honest and transparent, silo-free, Mark, a good point, establish and reinforce core values, thanks, Kerry, and a need to stand in the customer's shoes. We're going to park those, but come back to them, because those are great suggestions, which I'm going to show you how to link back to UGRs and culture in a moment. So by way of example, I'm going to share with you some UGRs, or unwritten ground rules, that I've come across in the workplace over the years, and they include these. At our meetings, it isn't worth complaining as nothing will get done. The only time anyone gets spoken to by the boss is when something is wrong. The company talks about the importance of customer service, but we know they don't really mean it, so we don't really have to worry about it, and so on. Now, the incredible thing is that these are literally driving people's behaviour, but they're seldom talked about openly. I put to you, if an organisation that can have documented policies, procedures, standards of service, very prescriptive job descriptions, all this documentation, but frankly, that counts for zero if the UGRs are different. UGRs are driving people's behaviour, but they're seldom talked about openly. So a good test for UGRs in any team or organisation is the new employee. If the new employee is lucky, they get an induction or orientation where they get told, this is the way we do things around here, and then they go and find out the truth. And they find out by deduction. They will look for certain cues and clues to deduce the UGRs in their new team or organisation. So I've been working on a theory, and I think this is pretty close to a 100% rule. And it goes this way. A person who is new to an organisation, irrespective of their level of seniority, is quieter than what they normally would be. Now, I've run this past a lot of people, and the vast majority of people agree that this is pretty close to a 100% rule. So why is that the case? Why are new people, including senior people, quieter than what they normally would be? When I ask that in a live audience situation, people will say things like, well, they're staying quieter to check out how things are done, they're getting the lie of the land, and then I will say, well, they're staying quieter in order that they can check out what the UGRs are. We don't have the term UGRs in our heads, but it's the natural human inclination. It is, we are staying quieter to check out what the UGRs are. And again, when I'm a live audience, I will say, why? Why do we do that? And people will say, well, they want to fit in and so on. I will paraphrase that and say, we are staying quieter to check out what the UGRs are in order that we can conform. They're that powerful. They drive people's behaviour, but they're seldom talked about openly. So that all goes together to raise the question of how do we find out what the current UGRs are and what do our prevailing UGRs need to be in order for the customer experience truly to be meaningful and valuable and to reap its true benefits. Now, more than 20 years ago, after I created the concept of UGRs, I touched base with a University of Western Australia, Professor Jeff Souter, to run the idea of UGRs past him. After I'd shared the notion with him, he said, Steve, this is a new concept. We're going to get Curtin University involved and we're going to do world-first research into UGRs, which we did, and it was absolutely fascinating. One thing we discovered through this research was that there is a very simple and powerful way for us to capture the current UGRs. In the research, we simply got people to complete the sentence to what we now call lead-in sentences. Lead-in sentences. So, for example, in the research, we got people to complete the sentence, around here customers are. Now, I wonder if you could predict some of the responses we got to that. Around here customers are. Just getting people to reflect on the way we do things around here. Frankly, the responses we got were gobsmacking. We got customers are an interruption to my working day, a pain in the neck and worse, and so on. It was through that research that we realised we had uncovered a potent tool to find out what the current UGRs are. Now, that was more than 20 years ago. So what we've done now is refine that process, develop the process a great deal, and we now say, well, look, while in 20 years ago we just thought up lead-in sentences, now what we do is craft lead-in sentences linked to those aspects of the culture which are necessary for our future success. In a customer experience context, what we do is say, what does our culture need to look and feel like for us to deliver the kind of customer experience we'd like to deliver? And which is kind of the question I asked you guys when I began my segment just now. So, for example, honest and transparent. Kim suggested that might be a cultural attribute we'd need in place for the customer experience movement to truly be successful. So, honest and transparent. Kim, I wonder if we got your people to complete the sentence around here being open and honest gets you. I wonder how they'd respond. Mark, you mentioned silo-free. So if we got people currently to complete the sentence around here when it comes to dealing with other departments, I wonder, or other work areas, I wonder how they'd complete that sentence. I hope you're taking my point that we first need to envision the kind of culture that we think is necessary for our customer experience initiatives to be truly successful. That's the first of our 5-step process we now use to use UGRs as a tool to craft the kind of culture that's necessary. So step number 1 is envision. It is to say, what does our culture need to look and feel like for our customer experience truly to be successful? And we do online or manual UGRs stock takes, where we get people to complete the sentence to lead in sentences linked to those attributes. So a couple of other examples. Creativity was something that I drew from Mike's presentation. So I wonder if we got people to complete the sentence in your place around here when someone comes up with a new idea. I wonder how they complete that sentence. I hope you're taking my point that the first step is to say, what does our culture need to look and feel like? The assess step is to get people to think about what the current UGRs are in relation to those cultural attributes. So the assess step is finding out what the current culture is like with respect to those cultural attributes when it's in place. I'm not going to bore you and don't really, to be honest, have time to walk you through each of the 5 steps of our process, but I just think I wanted to back up Mike's brilliant ideas and brilliant insights into customer experience by saying we will fail to capitalise on the whole notion of customer experience if we don't bring the culture along with us. And I really think that they're integral parts to making the shift. I guess another cultural attribute might be a willingness to change or a desire to change. We've got people in the past to complete the sentence around here when it comes to change. And I think you could probably predict the sorts of responses we got in response to that particular lead-in sentence. So that's really coming to the conclusion of my short segment on thinking about the culture and how that needs to be part of the whole customer experience movement. Before we open it up to questions, Mike, I might throw to you to say, do you want to add any ideas based on what we've just been talking about?
Sure. I think that the culture part is so important, and every time I hear you speak, Steve, I learn something new. I really see it as bookends to the work that we do around trying to change experiences for the better. No business can do what it's not wired to. So UGRs can help you find out where's your keel, where's your center, by asking those questions around here, ... And it can also be used to help improve the processes by which we work with our peers as we make those experiences change. And the same thing with customers. It's a great, quick litmus test, and it's also the provider of very deep insights. So I love every time you talk about culture with relation to experience because they are so intertwined.
Thanks for the feedback, Mike. I was speaking to a group a little while back, and this was a group of CEOs who meet regularly in a sort of mastermind group for themselves, 12 to 15 people. And one of these, and this is part of a larger group, so there are many of these groups, or boards they call them, right across Australia, and in fact overseas as well in the US and elsewhere. So there are many of these groups, and one of these groups invited me in to speak to them on the topic of UGRs. And soon after I introduced the notion of UGRs, one of the gentlemen in the room, let's call him Graham, put his hand to his forehead and said, "I don't believe this." And it stopped me, and I said, "Well, Graham, what's your point?" And he said, "Steve, I used to be in another mastermind group, but we've shifted locations and houses, and I've joined this group." And he says, "In the last mastermind group I was in, there was a UGR, and the UGR was, around here, new people to our group are to be treated with the deepest suspicion until they prove us wrong." He said, "I treated people in an aloof way. I was a bit cold and aloof to people. I joined the UGR of that group." He says, "In my new group that I recently joined, the UGR is, around here, new people to our group are to be welcomed for the contribution they can bring until they prove us wrong. He says, my behaviour is exactly the opposite. I'm almost physically giving new people a hug when they come into our group. His point, here he was a CEO of his own organisation whose behaviour was being dictated by a group with whom he meets once a month for a day or a half a day. That's how profound the power of UGRs is. So, envision, if you would, an attempt to bring in innovative, exciting, technology-assisted customer experience initiatives into an organisation where there are UGRs grounded in stability and conservatism and a lack of desire to change, and, well, guess what's going to happen? But the strange thing is, I suspect that the vast majority of customer experience initiatives do not encompass focusing on the culture as well. And I'm with you, Mike. It's a bookend that's required. So, enough of my talking. We're at a point now where we can open this up to questions. I can see that Jason has given one question asking whether we have a reference to the academic research paper. Jason, if that's in relation to the UGR stuff that I was sharing with you, there is a heap of information at the UGR's website, a heap. That is ugrs.net. So, Jason, I'd invite you to go there. There's a great deal of information there. And I'm also encouraging the rest of you, if you have any other questions for Mike and or me, to please throw in your question or comments, which we'd be more than happy to receive.
So
Jason.
Thank you, Steve and Mike. That has been really interesting. So it's Fiona back here again, and I'm happy to take questions from the group here, and I'll facilitate those. That has been really interesting, certainly given me a lot to think about in terms of the listen, watch and do from Mike and the unwritten ground rules, and I think that's been such a fascinating insight into what we almost don't know that we do, but what we do. So it's really given me a good understanding of how I need to think about culture as well for our own organisation here and how that affects our ongoing customer service. So thank you for that. So happy to open up to questions to our participants here. If there's anything that you'd like to ask of both Mike and Steve, please write your questions through and we can answer. We have a few minutes left to discuss anything that you've heard today or any other questions that you might want to pose through to our experts here while we have Mike on the line from the States and we're probably keeping him up. So while we have him online and Steve also, so please send through your questions.
Mike, I've got a question while people are pondering this, because I'd imagine that the maturity of the organisation in terms of where they're at in the customer experience world makes a difference. So what advice would you give to an organisation that is embarking on moving towards customer experience, and how would that compare to an organisation that's already tried this versus one that's tried it a great deal? I mean, have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, in your sample, Steve, can you give me an idea of how old these companies are and if they're kind of dyed in the wool with a non-customer-centric culture or not? Because that really has a big determining factor.
Well, I'm just wondering. I'm thinking on behalf of the participants at this particular webinar, and I'm imagining that possibly some people are in organisations that haven't dipped their toe in the water of the customer experience initiative at all, whereas some might have tried it in the past, and some might be giving it a good go right now. So that's where I was coming from, Mike.
Sure. Well, there are some people that believe that in order to make progress, you have to know where you are and measure all of the things that you've got so that you can get the business to make incremental improvements going forward. Usually found in supply chain, manufacturing, pharmaceuticals, heavily regulated industries, things like that. It's interesting to me that the biggest advances in customer experience are happening with the youngest companies, but there's still a number of them that are able to make some pretty good progress. So what do? the most important thing is to get people on the same page about what's possible, and secondly, to help them find ways to change the way things work around here. So when you ask that question, around here, ... that goes to culture, and part of culture is your propensity or your self-belief that you can do something different. So in order to get people to believe they can do something different, it's great to use some of those observational techniques. Just go out and walk around. We take clients shopping a lot in their industry to other industries, and we expose them to what the customer experience is like simultaneously from the customer's and the employee's point of view. That creates a backdrop for a conversation that quickly turns to, around here, this is how we've been doing things for so long. So we first earn the right to call into question some of the legacy behaviors that probably aren't performing very well for the employees or the customers. We typically find, or our customers find with us, that there are some things they're doing that they should just stop. They're wrong, they're costly, time-consuming, and off-putting. So when you start to marry those two ideas together, we generally take a pause so that our clients have a chance to say, you know, I see how all that wasted effort or that bad service could be turned into something better. If your clients, i.e. if your peers, can make that discovery for themselves, the chances of you being able to do more with them skyrocket. So I guess my advice, Steve, is the first thing you can do is go out there and see what's going on in the world, get a clear picture of it, go shopping with your friends, and don't force an idea on people. Let them discover it. That's the fastest way I've learned to win some support.
Thanks, Mike. A question for you, Steve, around how to align UGRs, especially in larger companies where there are separate business units which may have different objectives and conflicting priorities. So there's a question there for Leanne about how you align those. And then a question from Victor about how that UGRs might be specific to individual business units and how there might be some conflicting priorities between what might be the UGR of the CEO versus middle management. So if you could maybe perhaps give us some insight into that.
Sure, and I'd say, and these are related questions from Leanne and Victor, so thanks for that.
Yep.
I'd say it's appropriate, and we want different UGRs in different parts of the business. For example, a marketing department would have very different UGRs, and for that matter, personalities compared to an audit department in an organisation. So my first point is to say I think it's right and appropriate that different parts of the business have different UGRs. But that's not all of the story. The other side to this is many organisations have values, and I think in the vast majority of cases, the values, which is a way to shape the culture, is poorly done in many organisations. I think there is huge opportunity to make some parts of the culture, and therefore values, some parts of the culture not negotiable. That is, I don't care where we work in the organisation, there are aspects of our culture which are not up for grabs. I think staff are yearning for that sort of intolerance, and I think it's largely overlooked. So I think that addresses Leanne, or I hope that does. Now, Victor, you're saying, I think the UGRs in these units sometimes undermine the customer experience. Oh, absolutely. Middle managers seem to be vital in changing the culture of UGRs. I'd agree with you entirely. I'd say this, I think simply by virtue of leaders being leaders, they are often shielded from the prevailing UGRs. That is, despite their best efforts, often leaders are shielded from what the real UGRs are. That's where I think doing a UGRs stock take is hugely beneficial. That is, let's find out objectively what the current UGRs are by getting people to do a UGR stock take, where we get people to complete the lead in sentences. You probably imagine that is confronting, and it is, but what other way is there for us to find out what the real culture is? So we need to acknowledge that UGRs exist. We need to get people committed to recognising the fact that there are some parts of the culture which need to change, and we need to get people excited about the prospects for the future culture of the organisation. You know, when I hear Mike talking about the brilliant ideas that he has access to and that he has himself, how exciting is that to get an organisation along that sort of path? And how debilitating is it when the UGR is going to work against it? I think we can get people excited by this.
Thank you, Steve. Look, we're getting a lot of really good questions from the people who are right, in the coalface, so to speak, and saying, well, we're customer relations people, but how do we have that level of influence on UGRs to go right across the business? So, what are some of the tips that you can give to people who are working in these very important areas of the business, in these support areas, that they can influence the UGR? So maybe some of your top tips to these people who are working with consumers, but how can they influence the UGRs with their business?
Two thoughts come to mind, Fiona, in response to that. One is, I think it's often the case that senior leaders are not focusing on the culture as much as we like, and I think that can often be because there is a lack of a genuine business case for this. So I think as customer affairs, customer service professionals, we need to think about what is the business case for getting the culture right. We did some research last year which was absolutely fascinating. We asked this question. We said, if the culture of your workplace was to become as good as it realistically could, how much improvement would there be on people's performance/productivity? We gave a sliding scale ranging from 0, then 10%, 20%, and so on. The results were remarkable. Whenever I get the chance now, I will ask senior leaders that question. If the culture of our workplace was to become as good as it realistically could, how much improvement would there be on people's performance/productivity? I think that question alone can create a business case for getting the culture right. And we can reframe it around a customer experience notion, if you like, as well. If the culture of our workplace was to become as good as it realistically could, how much improvement could there be to the customer experience that we deliver? We could reframe that. So the business case is one side to this. Another is focusing on your own work area. That is to say, if we can't sell this to the rest of the organisation, I'd say focus on your own work area and really work at getting your own culture right within your own team, your own department, your own work area, and get people looking in and saying, what have these guys done? Because it's preferable to do it for the whole of organisation, but in the absence of that, work in our own work area. Okay,
I think they're really good tips. And here's a really interesting question from Deb, and I think maybe just turning it from the other side. So we've spoken a lot about our corporate UGRs, but what about a customer UGR? So that's not always evident through customer insight tools. So have you thought about it on the other side of the playing field?
I think I think it was somebody from SOCAP who raised this question with me many years ago, and it's the first time I'd ever considered the question. So this isn't the first time I've considered it, and I'll be honest with you, I don't have an answer because the customers, without doubt, have their own UGRs. There's no doubt about it, but I haven't developed a way to capture that. I don't know. It's a fascinating question. Maybe Mike and I can work on this. Mike, could you help me there?
I didn't think we'd have homework, Steve. They didn't tell me about that.
Well, it's not so much homework, but it's always that when you come to SOCAP and we've got such excellent members, we're always thinking. Isn't that right, Deb? And I think, though, that does come from what we're talking about in terms of the customer experience and the work that, obviously, Mike, you've taken us through. So it's really understanding, where the pressure points are from the customer, and I suppose understanding those and how perhaps that does get turned around into a UGR from their point of view as well. So I think that's certainly something that we need to think about. And Deb, and I'd like to come back to you, Deb, with something at some point.
Yeah, I'd second that. It's really good thinking, and I was being honest. It's not something I've developed, and I think it has merit in exploring that whole notion. What do customers bring? What are the EUGRs that they bring to do when they're doing business with us? And it has profound implications. But as I say, it's not something we've explored.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's something for our next webinar, which probably brings us to a close for our webinar today. So may I thank both Mike and Steve for your time today. I think that's been a really illuminating session for all of us today, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more questions that we'll be raising amongst our own teams to talk about how we can make sure that we're really understanding the customer experience and the customer journey that all of our customers and clients are taking, making sure that we understand, as I said, any pressure points that they're having, and also the unwritten ground rules and how what we do is making sense and making sure that we're not doing anything even subconsciously, and understanding how culture is so important in every facet of the work that we do. So may I thank you both for your time today, and may I also thank all of our members and participants today for coming on board today. And again, apologies that we had some technical issues last week, and I'm sorry for any inconvenience that did cause, but I'm glad you've been able to join us today. Again, I'll be sending you an evaluation survey, so please give us your feedback. We'll also be sending out a recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to, again, listen to it at your leisure for any follow-up. And we'll also be putting it on the SOCAP YouTube channel, which you can access from our website. So thank you all very much for your time, and I look forward to participating in another webinar with you next time. So thank you and have a lovely day.